Hey, it is Nick and Eric, and it is time for the 2024 season recap. And before we get started, we just want to send out a big thank you to everybody who raced Lemons in 2024, because all of this ridiculous stuff that we highlight on these videos is a direct product of the ridiculous stuff you bring to the races. All of your creativity and participation is what makes this thing happen, so we appreciate that. Let's get into what was great in 2024.
In these season wrap-ups, we kind of got in the habit of talking about firsts each year. This year we had the first actual land speed racing car. Stephen Hebert brought this nuts Chevy Citation X11. This thing's incredible.
Yeah, that Citation was a land speed car turned Lemons racer. We also had a Lemons racer turned land speed car when the Full Metal Jacket 59 Pontiac Bonneville went to the Salt Flats, went almost 150 miles an hour after doing several Lemons races.
Distilled Racing brought this amazing, pro touring build 41 Ford Coupe. Not really a Lemons car, but an amazing car.
We witnessed our second Edsel Ranger in Lemons, although this was the first hat car, which was an Edsel body on top of a Ford Crown Vic. That was excellent.
Not only did we have our first Rover 600, we had a Rover 600 owned by Slim Borgood. You know, everybody knows Slim Borgood, right?
I don't.
Oh, okay. The drummer from ABBA, who also raced in F1 and in truck racing.
Legendary Lemons team NSF Racing showed up with an actual real Mustang Mach 1 YU Classic, and they fitted it with the only engine that makes sense, a Chrysler V8.
On the subject of Chrysler V8s, we had our first Fifth Avenue.
I enjoy making money and spending it, but not foolishly.
BSOD, Blue Screen of Death Racing, they brought a Fiat X19. We've seen a couple of those, but this was the first one swapped with a Volkswagen VR6. It went great.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, that'll do it.
On the subject of Volkswagen Auto Group swaps, we had an Audi 4.2-liter V8 swapped, mid-engined Opel GT that actually won Class C this year.
And on the subject of Opel GTs, we had the Opel GT team, which had a Ford Turbo 2.3 and parts from Jeep, Mazda, Toyota, Honda, the Space Shuttle. That thing was also excellent.
Can't forget about the Bad Backs Jaguar XJ that was supposed to show up with the Triton V10 in it from a Ford, but ended up with, just a modular V8 and a crazy exhaust setup.
We hadn't seen Team Sensory Assault in a while. These guys are from Texas. They're famous for bringing Mazda rotaries. This time they came back with the first ever Mazda Repu rotary pickup truck. That was excellent.
Sticking with trucks, we had our first 1970s Dodge Sweeptline truck at New Hampshire. This thing's super overbuilt. Nobody cares. Just look at it.
Yeah, and on that note, if you're going to build something super overbuilt for Lemons, it's not a bad idea to stick a random truck body on it. Team Barely Legal built this super cheaty road race thing, and on top they stuck a body from a military K5 Blazer.
And if you just want to build something absolutely wild, why not a Ford F-250?
We saw our first Infiniti M30, aka Nissan Leopard. This one was a coupe, but it's also available as a convertible.
Infiniti convertible only.
No Lexus convertible, Infiniti only.
Infiniti only.
On the subject of convertibles, we had our first Volkswagen EOS.
Let's talk about General Motors for a second. Now, the thing about General Motors is a bunch of dudes in the Midwest, they get into the boardroom, they decide what they think the kids will think is cool, and then it winds up being both not cool and 15 years out of date.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
Case in point, the Chevy Malibu Max with 2 X's. This is going to be super cool for the hip teens of the 90s, and it was released in 2003. Bad Decisions Racing, they were in on this joke, and they did their own General Motors boardroom theater.
Sir, in order
order to make that work, it would need to be a hatchback.
You know Americans hate hatchbacks. You're fired. What do we got?
Sir, I may have an idea.
You're a genius.
You know what else GM probably thought was really cool and contemporary? Using a Z where it doesn't belong in a name. Case in point, Chevy Cruze with a Z for some reason. But we had our first Chevy Cruze this year. It was a 2011, fully like 20 years after that would have maybe been acceptable.
And what do General Motors executives think the hip kids of the 90s think is cool? Well, a sport compact car. So they stuck their classic SS badge on a Chevy Cobalt. And did the kids of the 90s love this thing? Well, we don't know because it didn't come out until 2005. Now, it's worth noting that there's actually 3 completely different Cobalt SS's. The first one used the supercharged drivetrain from the Saturn Ion Redline. There was another one that had a turbo that I think was better, and then there was yet a third that just had a Malibu motor, but it still had the SS badge. So you didn't know what the you were getting. We could do an entire Lemons World video on how absolutely stupid this is, but for now, in the year 2024, we had a couple of actual Cobalt SS's. One was Buckle Up Buckaroo's version that had that Malibu motor, and then there was Black Powder Racing, and they had the supercharged one. Cobalt SS.
That's probably enough about GM for the moment. We'll talk about a couple of Fords, and we had our first Mercury Milan, which is this, I guess. I don't know. I couldn't remember what they look like.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
I don't.
Yeah, I think the Milan was some kind of badge-engineered other-ass Ford, as is this Fox body Mercury Cougar.
And that Cougar had a Ford 200, and so did this 2000 Ford Mustang for a couple races.
We've only ever seen 2 Mitsubishi Lancers in Lemons, but for the first time in 2024, both of them were at the same race at Autobahn.
Now, we've seen Cadillac HT engines, we've seen Fieros, but we had our first Cadillac HT swapped Fiero.
Now, this wasn't the first ever, but it was the first in like a decade. A Yugo GV.
We had our first Kia Spectra 5, which is getting a turbo this year, I've been informed.
There were a couple of European firsts. We had this BMW E65 7 Series at Buttonwillow.
And we had our first Volvo XC70 cross-country wagon. And if you're thinking that a post-2000 European car sounds a little risky, it is. Neither of those cars turned a single lap.
We had our first ever all-female judging crew at Lemons at New Hampshire. Shelley, Mary, and Janice. They did a great job.
We had our first race with 4 Mercurs. Most people don't even know what the hell that is. I'm not sure I do.
I don't.
And we had our first ever race with 3 Chrysler Cordobas. Fittingly, they were red, white, and blue. And we're hearing a rumor that for 2025, there's going to be even more.
Had our first triple PT cruiser race at Sonoma as well.
Now, one of the favorite podcasts of Lemon staff is The Dollop.
I just need eggs and butter.
Now you work here. Put the apron on.
What?
Hey,
No.
can I get some eggs and butter? That's an impression of you. You sound wackadoodle.
And for the first time, a Lemons team, Wrong Way Racing, turned The Dollop into their theme. They used the episode that talked about raising hippos for meat.
That was a lot of firsts this year, which is super encouraging. We also saw people and cars come back after years away. We'll start with Lemons legend Mike Spank Spangler, who came back and raced with his son as his crew. He'd been away for 4 or 5 years, and they won an Index of Affluency in their first race back.
We also saw the return of this UK market MG Metro, which was originally owned by known weird car aficionado Mike Harrell up in the Pacific Northwest. Spank also owned this car, and in 2024, it showed up in Kentucky of all places with an entirely new team. We're glad to see it back.
Lemon's main and frankly only Simca enthusiast, a man named Sagi out of Pennsylvania, showed back up with his Simca 1118 for a couple races. That was awesome.
We hadn't seen Piston Liberation Front and their team captain Russ in a while. Well, that's because they had moved from the Pacific Northwest to Tennessee. They showed up at Kentucky this year with their previously raced Toyota Previa, although this time it had a small block V8.
Not Real Professional Racing showed back up with their Mazda Protege featuring a El Cheapo supercharger on it. Sounds great.
You guys are weird.
We hadn't seen this Porsche 944 from Team Dirtbag since 2010. Well, they showed back up and they picked up where they left off by having 944 problems.
Almost Ready had this old first-gen Ford Escort wagon. This thing's great.
We hadn't seen this really early Nissan/Datsun Maxima in forever. It showed up with a new team in California.
We hadn't seen Crazy Mike and his Scrubby the Beetle in several years. He came back this year and picked up right where he left off.
It bursts into flames. Wait, get it started. It's fighting and it's crashing terrible. Oh my, get out of the way, please. It's bursting into flames.
There were a few notable awesome performances in 2024. We'll start with the Double Vega IOE weekend. We had a race weekend with simultaneous events at High Plains and at Pacific Raceways. Both events had a Vega. Both events saw the Vega win the grand prize, the Index of Effluency.
Double Vega dominance.
A couple of guys who work at the Studebaker Museum in South Bend, Indiana showed up with a Studebaker Lark running a flathead Studebaker engine from like 1949. That was awesome. The car looks great. They won an IOE.
WT Florida Racing showed up at Sebring with this Dodge Dart that was previously somebody's pride and joy that burned up in a fire. They pretty much left that alone, put in some Lemon safety gear and went racing, and they won an IOE.
Longtime crap can aficionados Wonderment Consortium brought a early 90s Passat TDI that ran each day on a single tank of diesel. That won an IOE. That was awesome.
We think the Chrysler Crossfire is hilarious, but it wasn't so funny when this one won Class B and came in second overall at High Plains. Turns out, not a joke, serious road racing machine.
Also finishing second overall and winning Class B, a Pontiac Fiero, that one of Red Balls Racing out of the South.
Wisconsin Crap Racing keeps running their Suzuki Kazashi. We did a Lemons World episode on this car. It's got a CVT. The team is actively trying to kill it, and it will not die.
Why won't you die?
In 18 years of doing this, Audi wins overall are few and far between, but somehow in consecutive races at New Hampshire and MSR Houston, we had Audis win back to back.
You can't explain that.
Team Non Sequitur goes back almost all the way to the beginning of Lemons, and after 17 years of trying, they finally won overall at NCM in Kentucky.
Now, little known fact, 24 Hours of Lemons has a point system, and we crown national and regional champions every year. You can go read about the rules system on the Lemons website. Nick and I should probably do that. We have no idea how it works. But anyway, we're going to talk about the season champions for 2024.
The National Drivers Champion goes to Neil Losi. That is not a surprise. He has won
not one,
not two, but 3 Lemons Driver Championships in a row. This streak started, of course, in 2022 when he ran literally every single Lemons race on the schedule. And since then, he's run a bunch more races. And most importantly, to us, he's also won something like 25 indexes of effluency, which means he's not only consistent, but he also has great taste.
What's your opinion of this fine race car?
The absolute finest in Japanese and British technology.
And outside of Neil, of course, we had a lot of other high point scorers. Here are the National Driver Championship standings.
Our national teams champion went to Breaking Bad Racing, who have now won
not one,
not two,
but 3 championships in a row. We aren't too sure exactly what goes on at Breaking Bad Racing headquarters, but we know that they're mostly based in Texas, and they've got a whole slew of bad to mediocre cars that include a Tercel, a Festiva, an MX-3, some BMWs, some Miatas, some Mustangs. Anyway, they got like 10 to 15 cars. They brought as many as 8 or 9 to a race. They rack up a bunch of points by showing up. Nothing wrong with that. They're great people, and we will see them a bunch in 2025, I'm sure. Here are your team standings for 2024.
And we also have separate regional drivers and teams championships. Here are the results from those.
Each year we give out a Constructors' Championship to the make that scores the most points, and for the billionth year in a row, it is BMW.
That Constructors' Championship is based on just straight points. We also have something called the Real Constructors' Champion, which is the make that we think just did the best because. And there were a few candidates in 2024, including Ford, which scored 4 Class C wins from 4 different models, Pinto, Escort, Probe, and Lincoln LS. They had 3 IOEs with an Escort, an 81 Cougar, and a Lincoln Continental. And they also finished 3rd in the actual constructor points with the highest total ever for Ford, thanks in no small part to the Focus Club team out of Michigan who had a pile of top 5 finishes in their pair of Ford Focuses.
That's a pretty strong effort from Dearborn, but the actual real Constructors' Champion is instead their rival General Motors. GM finished just a single point behind Ford, but racked up 4 IOEs for a Lumina, the Double Vega weekend, and the S10 at Road Atlanta, and had an incredible 12 class wins, including a Fiero that finished 2nd overall. That's a strong showing for General Motors, and if history's any indicator, next year will completely suck for GM teams.
The counterpoint to the Constructors' Champion is, of course, the Deconstructors' Champion, which is the mark that kinda did the worst for the year. Now, interestingly, Ford was a strong contender for this award as well. They had 6 I Got Screwed trophies. That's a quarter of the entire I Got Screwed collection for the entire year. It's kind of funny that they were in contention for the best and also the worst. But because we have gotten used to seeing Mercedes contend for overall wins and land in the top 10 regularly, it was disappointing to see them hella not do that this year. Mercedes scored 0 top 10 finishes, 0 class wins, and had 2 dead last finishes for cars that didn't even start. Now, as an aside, we're mostly talking about good on paper Mercedes. We saw an E-Class and a couple of modern SLKs. The bad on paper Mercedes, such as this BMW E21 with a 5-cylinder diesel swap, those did pretty well. So if you're thinking about running in Mercedes, maybe think about a bad one. In the meantime, the Deconstructor for 2024, Mercedes.
And we wanted to take one moment here to talk about the electric vehicles that raced in Lemons this year. Now, before 2024, we'd only had a couple of them, and the EV distance record at a Lemons race was set by Duff Beer's Jet Electrica, a glorified golf cart, 7 years ago at 294 miles, and that record stood until 2024.
The first team to threaten that record was the Stealth Bummer. They have a Tesla-swapped Mazda RX-8. This thing had everything going for it, had Tesla powertrain, they had quick swap batteries, they had hot shoe Randy Popes driving it.
What do you think the chances are that this will take the overall win at this weekend's race?
Well, I'm really happy to be driving this car.
It set the 3rd quickest lap time of the weekend when it ran at NOLA. Distance-wise, did it beat an EV built by a golf cart company in 1981?
Yes, well!
And they had some reliability and consistency issues. They ran 59 laps, which is just 162 miles, just short of the record, but still a very cool build.
So, if a Tesla-swapped Mazda RX-8 doesn't set the record, what does? Electric Turtles 2018 Chevy Bolt with Apple CarPlay that has to charge mid-race at the Walmart down the street. They reset the record at 391 miles and then came back a couple months later and reset it at 535 miles while charging at the Walmart mid-race.
Now, would Electric Turtle's EV record last for 7 years like the one set by Duff Beer? No, it would last for like a week, because this Colorado team, Arc Blast, in their EV-swapped Datsun truck, immediately reset the record with 701 miles. And then later, they reset their own record at 711 miles.
Best of all, the Arc Blast and Electric Turtle guys have started cooperating to make each other better at EV racing. And we can't think of anything that more exemplifies the spirit of Lemons, and it turns out it doesn't matter what engine is driving the car, the Lemon spirit is there with everybody making friends at the track.
Friendship!
Now, of course, as you know, the Index of Effluency is the grand prize at a single Lemons race for the worst car that kind of does the best. Well, we've got a season-long version of that called the Copa di Bondo, which goes to the team that best exemplifies Lemons. There were several teams in contention for the Copa di Bondo in 2024, or should I say teams or people. Back in February at Thunderhill, a young college student from Sierra College, Erica Snow, brought her welding equipment and just offered help to teams for free. She wound up welding on like 15 different cars that weekend, and for the first time ever, we awarded the Index of Effluency to a single person. We gave it to Erica. And that turned out to be the tip of the iceberg. After that, she showed up to several more Lemons races, helping countless teams with welding issues, getting teams back on track that otherwise would have had to go home. She just instantly became a legend of Lemons.
Another of the teams in contention was Cheap Thrills and their fleet of terrible Cadillacs. Now this is a two-person team out of Louisville, that's Mike and Jill, and they show up and do like 6 races a year with these totally stock luxury cars, beat like 80% of the field without wearing out anything on the car, put it in the trailer, and then just pull it out the next race and do it all again. The only wrenching I think we saw them do all year was on their tow vehicle. Their cars are all powered by Northstar V8s, generally reviled in the industry. We have no idea how they keep running, but they do. Our favorite is the Cadillac ETC, which weighs 1 million pounds. 1 Class C this year, nearly 1 Class B. They're invisible throughout a weekend. Cars are great. Can't ask for more than that.
And you? Your name's Rude?
Yeah.
You call yourself a judge, you son of a bitch? I seen better judges at a county fair pie eating contest.
Ranger Road, of course, was back in 2024. They have a great program that puts military veterans into race cars. They now have 2 hand-controlled cars, a Volkswagen GTI and a Mini Cooper. But the biggest development was themes. They don't really need one, but they've really started leaning into it, including this excellent bear theme that they debuted at Pacific Raceways.
Also in contention is the team we will call the 420 team. This is an extremely hoopty 1970s F-body that is a hodgepodge of all kinds of swap meet garbage. They've always themed really big and carried through a general, how do you say it? Dude with a 600 horsepower Camaro that is always just one part away from owning the streets energy.
You mean, stoner uncle at the Circle K energy.
Yeah, that. Yeah, exactly. Well said. This year they won 2 more Halloween Meets Gasoline trophies for the best theme to bring their total to 3, and they did it with an Indiana Stoned and a Flint Stoned theme. For their last race, they pulled out all the stops at Sonoma with a great Save Our Peckers theme based on an old newspaper article that was about, chickens.
Those are all great contenders, and we expect them all to remain contenders for future Lemons seasons. But the Copa di Bondo for the 2024 season goes to Loose Nuts Racing. They have a V6 Chevy Camaro, but more importantly, they really lean into the Halloween meets gasoline trophy. That's $1,000 to the team with the best theme. Loose Nuts already had 4 HMGs on their trophy shelf going into this season. They added 2 more in 2024 for a Wild West theme at Hallett and a Gold Diggers mining theme at Sonoma. They also added an org choice at CMP for a redneck theme and another org choice at NCM for a protest theme. Even more impressive than that is what they add to the Lemons community as a whole. Outside of the races, they've driven as much as 10 hours to help other Lemons people work on their cars, and they've dedicated most of their racing efforts to raising money for the Lemons of Love charity. And in 2024, they raised $23,000 for that. So all of that taken as a whole, it was a really incredible effort and a well-deserved Copa di Bondo.
That wraps up 2024. Obviously, we have another set of 23 races coming in 2025. Among those, special things to look forward to. We're going to have block parties at Road America and at Carolina Motorsports Park. We are going back to Summit Point Raceway in West Virginia. I'm personally super excited about that. There are 6 Lemons rallies you can also sign up for. And really, we know that what makes 24 Hours of Lemons special is the participants and their creativity. So if you've had a dumb idea for years, and I know you have, registration is open right now. Sign up on the Lemons site and we will see you at the racetrack in 2025.
Welcome to the very not so cool runnings in your 2020
Every second you don't subscribe or watch one of these videos, another Vega is sent to the crusher. Won't you help us save Classic?